Hello everyone, I'm a homestead and homeschool mom of 3 going on 4 children at the end of this year, and I thought this week we'd talk a little bit about sourdough and how we make sourdough bread for our family, as well as why I decided not to buy bread anymore from the store. Alright guys, so this morning that I am filming this video is when I usually feed my sourdough. So if you want to have sourdough bread, you need a sourdough starter, which is a flour water mixture, and you have to feed it every day if you leave it on the counter. I don't really want to put mine in the fridge. I prefer to leave it on the counter. But that is just me, so we're gonna give it a stir there, and then we have to discard half of our sourdough starter, and that's every single time you feed it. So that's why I put it into that bowl, because I needed it for my bread. But then I feed my sourdough 1/3 of a cup of unbleached, unbromated flour, and then another half of a third a cup of unbleached, unbromated flour, and then the same amount of warm water as well, 1/3 a cup, and then a half of 1/3 a cup, and you just mix that in there, and that is how you feed your sourdough, or that's how I feed my sourdough anyway. Then what we want to do is just loosely fit that lid on there. We want it to be able to breathe. I do put a tea towel over my sourdough in the summertime just because of bugs and stuff in the house. Sometimes when you have a homestead, you have animals, you have bugs, so I put a tea towel over mine. Later in this video we're going to talk more about sourdough because my bread will need to rise, so we'll talk more about that. But I'm getting my mixer out because I'm just literally dumping in what sourdough discard I have. We're just dumping in all of our ingredients to make our bread. It's a pretty simple recipe. So you pour in all of your discard, and then we're going to add about 4 to 5 cups of our unbleached, unbromated flour. I get my flour at a local Amish store. I have tried using the unbleached, unbromated flour from the store. I think the brand is called Good Arthur or King Arthur or something like that. It has killed my starter before. I don't know what they put in that, but anyway, that is why I don't use just any flour. So we're going to put 4 to 5 cups of the flour in there along with your starter, and then what we're going to do is we're going to add 2 teaspoons of salt, as well as 2 tablespoons of honey as well. And I like to use raw honey if I can. And then 1 1/3 cups of warm water. And don't worry guys, I will try to put the recipe in the description box as well, so that you guys can actually see it too. But we're just going to place all of those ingredients that I listed into our mixing bowl with a dough hook. Don't forget your dough hook. And then we will mix it and let it stir for probably about 5 minutes.
Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus, because he first loved me. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
I did want to clarify that we are just trying to do the best that we can in homesteading. We are still learning more and more all the time. We don't do every little thing, all natural, but I try to do what I can. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there.
Was blind, but now I see.
Now what we're doing, guys, is just adding some oil around that dough and around the bottom of the bowl. Not actually on the dough, but just around the bowl to kind of grease the bowl some, because we're going to form our dough ball and then we're going to place it in our mixing bowl just to let it rise for several hours. So if I made this in the morning after I woke up and was doing, while I'm doing breakfast, which is what I like to do, then I will probably go to the next step, which is stretching and folding at about 3 or 4 o'clock. And then at the end of the day, before I go to bed, and just while I'm getting the kids ready for bed and whatnot, is when I will usually try to bake my bread. And we also want to place a tea towel over our sourdough bread. Some people like to kind of dampen their tea towel before they put it over that. That's a good idea too. I didn't this time, but it's a good idea. So today I wanted to talk about sourdough a little bit. Sourdough is just a naturally leavened bread, so it doesn't need commercial yeast in order to rise, which I think is awesome. It has good bacteria in it because it feeds off of that flour water mixture like I mentioned before. Now, I do still make bread that does have yeast in it sometimes. I have a good recipe for that I got from, I think it's called Good Simple Living here on YouTube. I can't remember their name, but I really like their recipe for that as well. But sourdough is so good for you guys. It's so healthy for you. It's a prebiotic, and it's just really good for your gut and your intestines while it breaks it down. And the longer it ferments, the better. I truthfully and genuinely also think this is just a really good skill to know, because, there was a time when it was hard to even find bread in the stores, you know what I mean? And so with this, you can make your own bread at home, and it only takes like 14 days to make a starter, guys. And maybe one of these days I can sit down and talk about that in a separate video. I am so sorry, guys, that my voice is cracking. I have been sick, so you will have to excuse me. I ended up moving my sourdough into the sunlight. Warmth helps it to rise, and so I ended up moving it into the sunlight, and we're just getting some other stuff done while it rises, doing some schoolwork, some cleanup, that sort of thing as well. And our next step, like I talked about before, was the stretching and folding. This helps make those little bubbles that you see in sourdough. It looks so appealing to the eye. And so we're going to just pull one side of it, and you're going to try to get it off. That's why we put the oil in the bowl, to try to get it off of there. And you just stretch it and you fold it back to the center, and you kind of turn it just a little bit, and you do the same thing all the way around, and it creates these little bubbles, and that makes sourdough so appealing to the eye. Sourdough is also sort of chewy, and it has that sort of crust on the outside, which makes it different like any other bread. Then once we're done with the stretching and folding, we'll form it back into a ball just the best that you can. It just takes practice, and then we will let it rise till the end of the day when we want to bake it. I also wanted to talk a little bit about how I don't buy bread at the store anymore. And it was sort of one of those things that you kind of have to just make your mind up that, like, you're not going to do it anymore, if that makes sense. We used to buy bread from the store a long time ago, and it would go bad in less than like 2 weeks. And it just come to me of how much preservatives and chemicals are in store-bought bread, and how you at least know what you're putting into your body when you make your own bread. And when you make your own bread and your own things, you end up appreciating it more. You can involve your kids in it as well. What I did right here is I greased my Dutch oven and set my oven on 500, and you want to preheat your Dutch oven. Don't forget that step. And Then we're going to end up putting our bread that we have let rise till the end of the day into our Dutch oven. And you can score it if you want to. If you don't want to, that's fine too. I'm not very good at scoring. I just use a really sharp knife. I don't use a scorer per se. But you let that cook for 20 minutes with the lid on. And then you take the lid off, and we're going to let it cook for 20 minutes without the lid. And I may next time try to turn my oven down to 475 next time to cook it on the second 20 minutes. Sometimes the bottom of my bread gets a little brown. So if you try that, let me know how it turns out for you. I will try to do that next time. But the bottom of my bread turned out pretty good this time, so I'm not too worried about it. But that is how we cook our sourdough bread. And my scoring isn't the best, but you know what? It tastes good, so that's all that matters. And you have bread, and it's pretty simple. You can still do other things while you let the bread rise, and you have a really good product at the end of it and natural ingredients. So I encourage you to try bread making and just to create purpose in your homemaking. And truthfully, all it takes in bread making is just prioritizing a little bit of your time during the day that you want to bake your bread. And I can try to do a video on doing a sourdough starter another day pretty soon. Thank you guys so much for watching, and may God bless you.